Right. Good evening, everyone. So, my name is Amanda Reichart. I am the managing dietitian here at Functional Nutrition RX. Tonight, we're going to celebrate the past 30 days, whether some of us did a full elimination program, parts of the elimination, or just focused in on healthy habits during the past 30 days. It's worth celebrating, especially because any effort, any energy put towards making ourselves a happier, healthier version of ourselves, as we're always reaching and evolving as time goes on, is worth noting and worth celebrating. So, of course, this presentation is being recorded. If anyone has questions during the presentation, please feel free to shout them out. I'm never going to deter a question ever. I do also have a Q&A at the end, and I will be checking the chat at the end of the presentation. So of course I have the information up here. It's just nice to look at to see, okay, we've checked off 622 when we first set the foundation, 629 presentation when we talked more about meal prep and essentially creating these habits to last us throughout the other portions, the other 3 weeks of the program and the foundation launch. And then, of course, 713, we discussed common obstacles that people tend to run into. And now tonight, we are celebrating ourselves and talking about reintroduction for those who did the elimination. Also, at the end, we're going to talk about habit maintenance or development for those, especially who focused in on setting those 1 to 3 SMART goals versus doing the full elimination and continuing with the success of the habits as a whole that we focused in on this past month. Oh, there we go. So the purpose of the reintroduction for Whole30 is to go one food group at a time. And then as we're introducing that one food group at a time, say, i.e., dairy, right? We'll maybe introduce yogurt or milk or a little, say, cottage cheese, something that's a lower sugar option. We'll get more into that just to rule out sugar and more so focus in on, say, dairy for that experience. When introducing a food, if there is not adverse reaction, the individual is to, do what's called like a washout period in the 1 to 3 days after that initial introduction, especially if there is an adverse reaction. But it's also considered a washout so that you can monitor for that because sometimes people have an adverse reaction, maybe the next 24 hours after to 48 hours after that food introduction, like for example like a skincare breakout for those who are looking at more of like skin related versus abdominal like digestive symptoms, which are more immediate. So we would introduce one food group at a time, a small portion one of the days. The other foods for that day would still continue to be Whole30 or an already reintroduced food. Do a 1 to 3 day washout period and then reintroduce the next food group. It helps to really isolate each group and allow you to mindfully focus in on how that food being added in truly makes you feel. It helps to identify sensitivities and how different foods affect your individual body. That can also be mood, right? Energy throughout the day. It helps to make this more sustainable, and we're treating it almost like a research experiment, right, on ourselves. Typically, you would do this even in a clinic setting when introducing different foods after doing a prescribed elimination diet, as such, like Whole30. So it's meant to make you feel good and focus in on food abundance, right? So following Whole30 for overtly elongated periods of time, more than say about 3 months, can really limit someone's diet. The goal of this program, when doing it in its full effect, is to really do this washout period of, for example, the 30 days to max 90 if someone really wanted to hone in on symptoms and uh, adverse medical effects, I would say, um, as doing a true washout. But 30 days is often enough. And it allows you now to focus in on food abundance, right? We don't want to be overtly restrictive lifelong. However, this is a good way for you to better understand your body and your body's needs. So it's a systematic approach. There is that observation period in those 1 to 3 days after, aka the washout period. And often we do like to recommend keeping a little food journal during this time. Maybe, the notes of your phone. You can use the Practice Better journal as well. Practice Better, the app that everyone has access to through this program, has a diet log. Someone doesn't have to use the full macro tracking extent to it because I know that can be laborious, although helpful. It does have a digestive symptom log as well as a mental and emotional log in there as well. So you can use it to the extent that fits your needs best. I also am going to highlight and really note that symptom questionnaire we touched on in the first 2 sessions to have completed, as it's good now. Once you now finish the 30 days, it's good to go back and recomplete that symptom log and compare it and see, okay, where has things maybe started to change, and then to hone in on those particular things that changed when you are doing that reintroduction and see, okay, I notice I'm feeling less bloated or less cravings for certain foods, potentially sugars. I'm noticing less brain fog, less breakouts, for example. All right, now as I'm doing the reintroduction, these symptoms that I've noticed changed favorably. Let's see when I'm reintroducing them, if I get one of these symptoms as I'm reintroducing these foods. So it really can help you to target things better. So the reintroduction basics is to take it slow, right? It can take at minimum 10 days, but it can go 30 or more if you're really isolating. For example, I'm just going to add yogurt in, which is a lower lactose food. I'm going to do 1 to 3 days washout in between. And then maybe I'm going to actually focus in on milk, right? Some people might just treat it as that food group as a whole. All right, I trialed milk, I'm good. I'm going to do 1 to 3 days. And now I'm going to add in, gluten-free containing grains. So do it to the extent that works best for you. However, even though it's a little bit more laborious, you will have a tendency to learn more about your body when you do elongate it that in that systematic manner. So one food at a time or beverage group at a time. It can be a little conflicting. Say I was to add in, cottage cheese one day and maybe soy in the same day, because then it's like, okay, what really, might have triggered me potentially. So on reintroduction days, as I've stated, you should try to maintain Whole30 compatible foods aside from that particular food group that you're adding in. Sometimes some individuals will even do a half portion one day. If they feel good, the next day do a full portion to see the extent of that portion's impact. Take it as far as what works for you. I personally think it's best to do it as I had just previously mentioned, i.e., add yogurt in, then do 1 to 3 days washout, then maybe trial in milk, then 1 to 3 days washout, do maybe cottage cheese, 1 to 3 days washout. Okay, on to the next group. Now I'm going to do, beans, for example. So challenge your system, include foods from the day's introduction into your meals. Uh, Alcohol is the exception, of course. We don't want to add alcohol into multiple meals in the day. Um, and then, of course, reintroduce each item to challenge your system. So, something to tap on. I'm using whole wheat bread versus a blueberry muffin, or yogurt's a really easy example of, say, using a plain Chobani or Icelandic yogurt as that introduction to rule out the sugar component, because technically those are two isolated components of the food groups that we did, or foods that we did focus on in the elimination. So if I'm adding in like a super sugary blueberry muffin or like a Chobani flip, right, as my food that day, not saying those foods are bad. There's no good or bad foods. It just can kind of overlap because it's like, oh, is it the gluten or the dairy, or is it the sugar that's bothering me, right? So it just allows you to have that critical eye. And like we said, the washout period of 1 to 3 days is important in between challenging those food effects. So the main food groups that you're adding back in is, of course, the added sugars, legumes, and beans, if those were foods that you did cut out. I know when I was giving the presentations, I was saying, make this work for you. If you know beans sit well with you because they're great high fiber food that also can help to bolster up your protein and micronutrients, then keep them in. So if it's a food you didn't really eliminate, you don't have to really focus too much on that reintroduction, right? Um, Soy, if you did the challenge from more of an omnivore point of view versus a plant-based. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, you kept tofu or tempeh or edamame in the program, so you don't have to reintroduce that. But for those who are omnivores, meaning you eat, meat and plants, soy was one of those foods. So you would isolate that back in. What's interesting is, although with the elimination we said eliminate grains, when you do the reintroduction, you can challenge it between gluten and non-gluten containing grains to really help you know, okay, does gluten actually bother me? And I think that's an important one to really hone in on with the reintroduction period. And we'll go into like what are the gluten containing grains and what are the non-gluten containing grains. Dairy, as I've mentioned, alcohol. Some individuals like to test added sugar last, so they're keeping it low and out of the diet for a more elongated period of time to help those cravings. So this is just an example layout. So days 1 through 30, right? We did the Whole30 elimination for many of us. And now day 31, right? So tomorrow is technically the last full day of the program, and then you'll start the reintroduction after that. So Wednesday. So sometimes you'll see online, it'll say reintroduce added sugar all by itself. I like to nudge it towards the end of the block, as you could say, later in the bullets. And then you do maybe like a 1 to 3 day washout. So days 32 to 33, Whole30 elimination, those washout days. Day 34, reintroduce legumes or beans. Then day 35, day 36, a washout period of just Whole30 foods. And then reintroduce non-gluten containing grains, washout period, then dairy, washout period, then gluten containing grains, washout period, alcohol, and then washout period, maybe added sugars. Make this work for you, of course, but I like to make sure I put that information out there so there is some kind of a template to follow. So in the suggested timeline, if beans were something that you did eliminate, a good way to add them back in is say, okay, soy. Really, technically, I should have made this like 2 slides. So say you're adding soy back in. You could do a tofu veggie scramble. You could do tofu roasted in the air fryer and make them into little snack bites or as a protein in your meals. Of course, with beans, a chili or a cowboy caviar in the summer is always great to have. You could do that with, of course, on a salad in a protein bowl. Of course, if you're doing beans later on in the introduction, you could do it with a grain containing chip if it, sits well with you. Hummus can be a way to reintroduce beans back into the diet. Of course, these are just some example of beans, but we know beans, just like fruits and vegetables, come in a lot of varieties. So use it as a time period to really try different options that you might not have gotten to experience or play around with in recent months. I really love the Brahmi snacking beans. They're called Brahmi lupini because they're the Italian lupini beans. The sea salt and vinegar flavor is great, and you could just keep them in your bag, especially during your day. And they're a great source of fiber, protein, and some carbs too, and a little bit of fat because they're in olive oil. So that's just an easy way to introduce beans. Non-gluten containing grains, right? Because this is always the big question. What are gluten containing grains? What are non-gluten containing grains? So rice does not contain gluten. There are oats that are specifically labeled gluten-free oats. So no, oats are not naturally gluten-free, a lot because of cross contact. So gluten-free oats can work in this category. Corn, quinoa, for example, millet, amaranth can all work. However, note farro, if that is a part of one of the grains that you want to add, that is actually a gluten containing grain. So just being aware, you could do an oatmeal as a side with breakfast, or make like a protein overnight oats, or make a corn tortilla. Trader Joe's actually has some awesome ones, but you can find them most grocery stores. And corn is a whole grain too. And or you could add rice or quinoa with your dinner as part of a protein bowl, a topping on a salad, a side. I also loved, just as a general nutrition recommendation, when making rice or quinoa, it's typically 1 cup grain to 2 cups water on the package when cooking them. Sometimes for added flavor, a boost of micronutrients and protein, I like to swap some of that water with bone broth, depending on what I'm making it with. So if I'm doing like a chicken stir fry with some rice, maybe doing a chicken bone broth, doing 1 or 2 cups chicken bone broth in the rice instead of the 2 cups water and 1 cup rice, just as an example. You could do 50-50, 1 cup chicken bone broth, 1 cup water, 1 cup rice. See what meets your flavor needs. There are also some good lower sodium bone broths out there for those that do have to watch their sodium. Like the Kirkland Organic is a great bone broth, and Pacific actually ends up being one of the lower sodium ones out there too. So, and quinoa, I get questions about the different colors. That's actually more culinary related than nutrition related. So have fun exploring, different colors on the plate, but for the most part, they are similar in nutritional quality. Dairy, this is the one where people might want to isolate the different foods more so, because different dairy items contain different levels of lactose. So, for example, like the hard cheeses like Locatelli, Romano, Parmesan, sharp cheddar, Swiss, tend to be lower in lactose than, say, like a provolone or a Munster, for example. Uh, Yogurt, cottage cheese tend to be lower lactose foods, especially clarified butter, as we know, was allowed in the Whole30. But however, milk, ice cream, for example, are higher lactose items, so more likely to cause those different digestive bloating or skin issues or congestion for some. So if you are on the hunch that dairy is something that you might be more sensitive to, you can isolate the different levels of lactose if you want to get that specific. If you want to keep it simple, keep it simple. Do, maybe a yogurt or a cottage cheese or a small glass of milk as one of your introductions, or have different ones throughout your day, like yogurt at breakfast, a little side of milk maybe at lunch, and a cottage cheese related dessert like with some cacao powder and some slivered almonds and maybe some toasted coconut and strawberries on top as like a evening sweet swap, just to see. Dairy, however, can be affected by portion size. So some people can tolerate 1 or 2 servings in a day, but maybe not 3. So I give this information. I know it could be a little bit of an overload for dairy, but I do want people to be empowered with this information because I feel like dairy tends to be one of the more common trigger foods. So when introducing it, I want you to have that information available. I will list in the email recap the foods that are higher lactose versus the lower lactose dairy items to really help with this section, especially of the introduction. So gluten containing grains, so regular oats that are not labeled gluten free, wheat, barley, rye, farro are all examples. So you could, in this section, maybe add like a nice, turkey sandwich in, especially if you've already added in beans and the hummus sits well with you. You could do like turkey with a little hummus and some broccoli sprouts on there, and do it with some whole wheat bread and a side of, some fruit, for example. Wheat is also found in a lot of condiments, so you can use different condiments as a way to introduce wheat too. Barley, of course, you could do a grain salad, um, especially in the summer. It's great because they're no heat, and you can add, shredded, meats to it. For example, veggies, beans. Alcohol. So alcohol, I always say in moderation because it is a carcinogen. So no matter what, even if you do the elimination, you're like, it doesn't really bother my stomach. It doesn't really bother me much. It's still a carcinogen, so meant to still keep on the lower end. There is research to back that up. So, of course, if you're trying to understand your individual tolerance of that, including maybe like a red wine or a light beer or spirits. Of course, I'm always going to say in moderation. I do like the pre-portioned options, or of course, when having servings, breaking up with water, consuming it with a meal, and avoiding having it right after a workout, say a good workout on a Friday, and then people tend to go out maybe for like happy hour or something. It can really make it harder for your body to recover. So just be selective when you go to introduce it, as it does affect your body's ability to recover from a musculoskeletal standpoint as well, and enjoy responsibly. The RDA is less is best, essentially 1 to 2 glasses for 1 glass per day for women, one serving per day for women, 2 servings for men, but of course less is best. So processed foods and sugars, of course, there's everything in moderation in life, right? So because it's a whole 30 quote unquote like eliminated food, it doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, right? If we have some added sugars in our week or in our life, it's not the devil. It's just how frequent and how big are the portion size, and looking at our holistic health picture. So we know, of course, sugar is not the greatest for our bodies, but say we're having, one of our favorite coffee creamers, right? Like some of the Nut Pods flavors has some added sugar in it. And you're having like a couple tablespoons in your coffee. It's not really the devil. Or maybe you're making a sweet swap for an evening snack and it has some maple syrup or honey in it. That's great. Those are one of the better ways to add sugar to your food, especially honey, because it has other antimicrobial properties that A helps to soothe the digestive lining and B can help to kill off some bad bacteria in the digestive tract, especially with some herbal tea can work great. So it's picking the better option, right? But say I really love a good, you know, say cronut, right, from the bakery, right? Maybe I'll have like a half of that cronut as a little dessert one night on a Saturday night with loved ones, sharing it socially. Go ahead. It's not the worst thing in life. And again, if we're doing that every week, multiple times a week, say, then that's where it can be problematic and potentially add up for our blood sugar health or overall inflammation or digestive health. But by no means do we want to demonize any foods. So some other important, oh goodness, okay, some other important considerations, right? For those who completed the InBody measurement at the beginning, you can now, once the program is fully over tomorrow, Whole30 recommends no measurements during those 30 days, as we said in the beginning. Um, Now that that 30 days is over, it can be a good idea if you were doing this for body comp related reasons to measure. Take note of the water changes as well. You can compare your first and your second through the InBody app, or of course through the print off that you get when you do use it. The InBody machine is available, of course, at our location at 41 John Street in Babylon. No appointment is needed. You just come to the front desk at Inside Elevation, as we're located inside Elevation Fitness, and say, "Hi, I'm a Whole30 participant. I would really like to use the InBody scale." They'll say, "No problem. We'll walk you back." They walk you to it. And of course, the individuals operating the scale, it's not, they know to respect your privacy in terms of there's no hovering over the scale or discussing one's weight, unless someone has questions, of course, but we always want to respect everyone's needs oriented around the scale. For those especially who did this to really just focus in on eating some more whole foods, maybe reducing some sugar, maybe reducing alcohol, whatever that is. And you set a couple of SMART goals at the beginning of the program. Think about, and even just for anybody who did Whole 30, because we all set goals together as a team, right? So write down some habits that you started to form in this past month that you're proud of, that it doesn't have to be 100%, right? Even in school we're taught like 80-85% is a good goal to aim for, right? Or if you were hitting it 100%, awesome, knockout, that's great. But write those down to really stay mindful of the work you did and the work that you look to continue, right? Complete the pre questionnaire as I mentioned. I'm going to attach that in the email just so that you have access there. And you also have access in the module platform in Practice Better. But now going forward, right, we had the scaffolding of the Whole 30 program kind of helping like to keep us in line, right? And I mean that from the standpoint of the group having the continuous, you know, recipes sent and the modules and the seminars available and the PowerPoints, that although that scaffolding is going to deduce now that the program is ending, we still want to keep the proverbial ball in the air. So we want to write down 2 to 3 goals that we want to really commit to for the next month and stay mindful of, right? You can always, if you're not already, do one-on-one nutrition counseling with our registered dietitians, as if we take your insurance for the programs and group seminars, we often do for the one-on-one counseling as well. And for most people there is not a copay. So if having that extra support really helps, right? For most people, having that teammate to walk along with you and creating that space in counseling to discuss and channel our energy for the next couple weeks really helps. Consider that. That's fine. And that's great. If you're doing it on your own, share those goals with loved ones that you trust, that are going to support you, because there is actually literature to back up the more individuals you share your goals with from a safe standpoint, right? Not someone who's going to be like, "Oh, did you do this yet?" We want it to be from a supportive standpoint, but the more individuals you share your goals with, the more likely you are to keep to them. I think it's in part because it makes it tangible, it makes it real, and it's something we want to put our word toward, right? We don't want to hold ourselves to this high standards of I got to do this 100%, right? We got to give ourselves love, because doing something 80% of the time, most of the time, is better than expecting ourselves to do something 110% for what 30% of the time, right? Because people tend to burn out and it doesn't make it as sustainable. And we want to be real. That's the whole point of SMART goals. SMART goals stand for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, and time bound. So these are some examples saying, all right, in the next month, I'm really going to emphasize breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 1 to 2 snacks in my day, creating more of that like framework. Um, most days of the week, like 3 to 5 days a week, right, for the next month. Or I'm going to select 2 to 3 fruit servings per day, at least 5 days per week for the next month. I'm really going to try to aim for that. Or I'm going to focus in, because we were doing a lot of meal planning during this, right? I want to meal plan 2 to 3 meals per week that I'm going to cook in bulk and set myself up for success with, right? And a lot of these Whole 30 recipes, even though they are Whole 30, you could tweak them. You could add beans in, you could add grains in, you could swap some things. That's totally fine. Customize them for you. One of the goals could be, I really want to hone in on label reading for the snacks that I eat routinely in my day. Because there's a lot of great layers with Whole 30 that's kind of sneaky, which includes, label reading is a big portion of it. It gets people really honing in on, well, what's in what I'm really taking in, because of that elimination component. So even if you're not doing elimination diet, it's still good to always be aware of what are the ingredients I'm consuming on a regular basis. What is this food predominantly a protein food? Is there a decent amount of fiber, over 10% of my daily value listed on the food label? But of course, mindfulness is key. So I like to say, write them down, journal, make it tangible, and commit to you, right? Commit to you, keep it meaningful to you and what matters to you and what feels good for you. And part of what makes people, I think, successful at times with certain goals is make it who you are, right? Like everything in life is yin and yang, right? There's always extremes on one end or the other. But what I mean by make it who you are is make it part of your identity, right? Say, I am someone that does this. I am a person who meal preps. I am a person who reads labels. I'm a person who likes to eat whole, plant-based foods. Doesn't mean I don't eat meat, but it means I eat plants, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, but make it who you are. Because when you wear that identity, it makes it easier sometimes to nudge that discipline a little bit more forward when we need it, right? We all sometimes need that little extra discipline push. But if anyone has questions, we're going to start a Q&A in a moment. And I'd love people to share, whether privately, in the group chat, or in the group me, just some of the most significant changes that you've noticed about your body or your mind during the Whole30 program. I know I've spoken to a few individuals in counseling and heard a lot of great things, but I think it's always good to share and celebrate. So we're going to talk about that. And I also just want to say thank you guys. I love doing programs and seminars with you guys, and I love hearing about what goes on. And I also just really love it when people are taking that extra step, because I know everybody is so busy. And I think it's a really cool thing when someone takes that moment to sign up for something and commit to something to just make life a little bit better. How can I be a little bit healthier each day? Because not one person is perfect, right? So, and sometimes we ebb and flow, right? We go through different periods and cycles in our life. And especially I know this time of year is hard sometimes to do Whole30, but it's also an easier time for some to do Whole30. So picking the timing can sometimes be difficult. So I also just really want to highlight that committing to yourself, whether you're in different cycles of your calendar year, your life, that you signed up to do something to make life better for you, and maybe even sharing this with your family too. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. I'm going to check the chat. And of course, I'm going to share the recording later this evening as well. So I'm going to step out of the share screen mode. Oh, I think the share screen might have knocked off. I hope everyone was able to view it. Oh, Colleen, I thank you for messaging that. I don't have access to the chat when I'm sharing the screen. Um, when did the slides go off? Does anybody know? Shoot. My apologies for that, as I definitely was not aware. On my end, it came up that I was sharing. I am going to share those slides with everybody, though. Does anyone have any questions or anything
It's
that they
been,
would like to share?
there's been like no slides for pretty much since like the first slide.
All right. Well, without, further ado, thank you guys for your time tonight, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your summer. Of course, if you want to share anything offline, we're open to that and excited for that. And just have a great night, okay? I'm going to share that email shortly. Be well, guys.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Helen, are you saying something? Sorry, cut out.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I really
it.
learned a lot.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you, Helen. That was
Thanks.
so sweet. Oh, thank you, Carolina, too. That was very nice. And Lisa, oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have such a good night, and don't hesitate to reach out, share. And just a reminder, if you want to use the InBody, just feel free to go into Elevation and ask to use the InBody scale for the body composition. Have such a great night. Have such a great rest of your summer if I don't get to hear from you guys, and be well. Bye, everyone.